Hello everyone, I hope you find yourself having a great day. I'd like to congratulate the Boston police and all the authorities that were able to take out the first bomber and wrangle up the second little Weasley coward, and he's in for a fun ride. So let's forget about them pricks and move on to this next tutorial. This tutorial is going to have to do with creating blood splatters. Animated blood splatters like you might see in some of the popular action adventures where someone's shot or a bomb goes off or some other traumatic type event occurs where blood spatters. And what we're going to do is we're going to be working with a clip from Spartacus. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a blood spatter right there at this scene where this guy takes a toothpick in the face. About right here. It's going to be a short clip, but as that spear penetrates his face, we're going to have the blood spatter towards the camera, and what would appear to be a blood spatter land on the lens of the camera. So let's get started. First we're going to open up Photoshop. So let's get that fired up. And I'm using some custom brushes. They're actually taken from water droplets, dyed water. And it was splattered on glass, then captured, brought into Photoshop, and at that point I made custom brushes out of it. So how do we load custom brushes? Well, that's pretty simple. You'll take any of your tools that is a brush where you can go in and select brush elements and tweak and scale and things of that nature. But once you've got a brush selected, go up top here and under your size attribute, drop that down and then spin out right here where it says load brushes. So I'm going to load brushes, and I'm going to go to my desktop, and I've got some custom blood spatters that I'm going to load into my brush palette. I'll put a copy of these brushes in the description beneath this video. You can download them so that you can do this whenever you have a need for any blood spatters, or just play with it. It's pretty fun to do. So the new brushes are always loaded at the bottom of your palette. And let's take a look here. We've got a variety. Let me create a new canvas. The video that we're going to work with is a HD piece, and it's 1280 by 720 footage. So we're going to create a new document at 1280 by 720. And this is just going to be a blank document. Whoops, I got that wrong. Let's just close that and we'll do a new one. 1280 720. Here we go. And you see we've got our brush selected, and it's rather large. It's too large for this piece of footage here, so I'm going to reduce that down. You can see it's still rather large. Again, a blood spatter is going to appear to be large because it's hit on the camera lens and it's in the utmost of the foreground, so it's going to appear to be large. It's still a little bit large. Let's reduce that, something about that nature. We can go through here and pick a variety of blood spatters. And what I found best is even to combine them based on what you need. Now that's a pretty good looking one. It looks as if it came straight on because there's no longitudinal stretching of the splatter. That's a pretty good one. Let's use something like this here. Okay, so I'm going to bring it up in size a little bit. I'm going to take it up to about 900. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to have it hit at somewhat an angle like this. Now what I want to do when I place this blood splatter is I want to have the proper color selected, and I'm going to have a darker, deeper blood rather than just a default red like you might see here. I'm going to have it a nice deep color, something about like this. I'm going to go even a little bit darker, and we'll see how this looks. Now when you place your blood, you want to give into consideration, number one, the duration of how long this is going to appear. Obviously it's not going to sit there for 4, 5, 6 seconds. That would just be too corny. But it will appear to anywhere from about a second to second and a half, sometimes shorter than that. But we want to give consideration, for example, the area on the right where you can see where that horizontal piece has been placed. We've got what would appear to be a a drip beginning to form on the furthest right of this. Then we've got a round piece at the top middle of the screen that might make a suitable drip of blood. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out how I want to do this, and I think something about right here will be pretty good. Now, there's some opacity already involved. If you look at this, there's areas of deep, rich red and areas that are less intense. Those less intense areas will be transparent just to add to the realism of this. So I'm going to leave it at about like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. And what I'm going to do with this second layer is I'm going to have blood hit in a couple of stages, just milliseconds apart from one another, so that blood would appear to have been in a dimensional travel where a larger portion hits and then the spray hits just a brief microsecond after that. So I'm going to go in and change my brush. Let's pick something that's got a lot of mist to it, something about like that. And I'm going to scale that guy up pretty good. And let's see here. We'll put him about something about like this here. And I'm going to click that a few times just to increase its intensity. And so now we've got, I'm going to release my brush here. Let me change that out to something that's just not so irritating. These larger brushes can get kind of weird on you if you're manipulating them around the screen. Okay, so we've got two layers. We've got the first hit and then the second hit. Okay, so at this point, let's go ahead and save this out. We're going to save it as, we'll call it sequence. And we're going to save it as a Photoshop document. That way our layers are going to be intact when we bring it into After Effects. Okay, so at this point we're finished. We don't need Photoshop anymore, so we can shut that guy down. Alright, so let's fire up After Effects. And once this fires up, I'm going to minimize it and show you what I've got that you'll need. Of course, any video clip that we'll do, any kind of action footage where there's been a scene of a battle scene or shots or any kind of traumatic injury that's occurred in the vicinity of the camera where blood may have splattered on it. So let's give After Effects its time to do its thing. Alright, so with this I've got the sequence that we just created. I've got the video clip that we're going to apply the animated blood splatter to, and I've got the custom brushes. I'll include the custom brushes, like I said, in the description, so you'll have a copy and you can recreate this on your own. So let's fire up After Effects, and first thing we're going to do is import that file, and let's see if we can find it. There we go. And we're going to import that as composition, and we're going to retain the layer information. We want editable layers. Okay, so now we've got all of our pieces of this element. Now we want to set our composition under composition settings. We want to make sure that we're 1280 by 720, and we are. Alright, so at this point we can select one of our layers, and what I found is that if I put for example a solid beneath all this, let's say green or something that's really contrasting where I can get a look at this, it really helps. But let's go ahead and import that clip. Let's see where we can find that. We'll go ahead and import that clip and place it beneath these layers. Right? And you can see that our blood is just not believable enough. It's just a little bit too rich still. Okay, so what do we want to do? Let's go up under Effect, make sure that we've got our layer selected. Or tell you what, let's do this. Well, let's take it and select either one of your layers and go under Effect, Color Correction, Channel Mixer. And let's take this red and tweak that out a little bit. We're going to knock that down a little bit so that it's a little darker. This is this particular layer, layer 2. And you can see that it's different in regards to layer 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to take layer 1. Remember our red, we've knocked it down to 50. We're going to take layer 1. we're going to apply the same effect, color correction, channel mixer, and we're going to knock it back down to 50 as well. Okay, so we've got our two colors, our two layers of blood splatters, and we've knocked that color back. So what do we need to do now to make this a little bit more believable? We're going to apply a fast blur to it. So from your effects, type in fast blur. In most cases you can just type fast and that will be sufficient. We're going to pull that fast blur out on our layer 1, and at this point we're going to play with the blurriness. And that looks pretty good right there. We'll go to layer 2. We're going to apply the fast blur to layer 2, and we're going to play with its blurriness. Something about like that. Okay, so now we've got our blood and it's overlaid our scene. Now what do we need to do? Well, let's take and we're going to take and hide this layer 2, and we're going to remove that blur off of there also, just for now. Whoops, I got the wrong layer selected. Let me take that back to 50. Go to layer 1 and knock that back to 0. Now we're going to animate this by creating a solid that's the same color, right? And then we're going to keyframe that out. But before we do that, let's find out the piece of the footage where we want this animated blood splatter to begin. So they're having a little fight here. He takes a spear in the mouth. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to time this out so that we've got an impact of the spear. We still need to have some time for that blood to travel and hit this camera lens. Okay, so it's hit the spear. Let's say at about right here when we see some blood traveling out. About right there. We'll go ahead and take our layer 2 and our layer 1, and we're going to move that down to begin right here. Okay, so what we need to do is keyframe a couple of attributes here, and we're going to take and transform the opacity so that one frame prior there is no opacity, or the layer is absolutely transparent. So we'll knock that down to 0, and let's take this other one also and knock it down to 0. Okay. Now we're going to go forward one frame, and at this point we're going to go to 100% on the opacity. Okay, let me zoom in here. Apparently I didn't click that just right. We're going to move our 0 to here. Okay, and then 100% the next frame. Now we also need to take our second clip. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. We've got that other guy turned off for right now, and we've got the blur off on this layer so that we can work with it. Okay, so let's take and we're going to offset this just a touch. This layer 2, we're going to move it. Let me zoom in so we can get a look at this. Layer 2, we're going to have it start just a microsecond later. So you can see that we're starting here, and we're going to move this guy over just a touch. Not much at all. So we've got the first strike, and then we've got the second strike. See how the first one hits, and then the fraction of a second later, the second one hits. Okay, so we'll go ahead and turn off that layer 2 for now. Let's get back to layer 1, and what we're going to do is come into the timeline where it begins, and at this point we're going to create a new solid. So we go to Layer, New, Solid, and we're going to make that new solid the same color as our blood by taking our eyedropper and actually selecting that blood. Okay, so we've got our new solid. And here's what we're going to do. Let's reduce the opacity of that solid just a touch so we can see through it. Alright, and let's zoom in on that guy a bit. Let's put our first blood splatter up here. Or I'll tell you what, let's put it here as if this larger piece of blood that hit began to drip from here. So with our mask tool, what we're going to do is, when you make this mask tool, make sure that you click and drag to create a few curves so that we can have nice smooth areas to move downward with. So I'm going to begin clicking here, click and drag, 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 and then we'll close off our loop. Okay, so if I increase my opacity back up with that, we'll see, let me deselect that mask. You can see that we've created an area that we can manipulate here on top of the piece that we've already created in Photoshop. Okay, so we need to begin to keyframe this, but we need to also set its initial transparency to 0. So if we come back one frame, let me go back one frame, we're going to tell its opacity to be keyframeable, right? And we're going to knock it back to 0. Okay, so then we go forward one frame, we're going to tell its opacity to be 100%, and at this point we need to move into our scale, position, rotation, and anchor point. We're going to tell all this to be transformable and for us them being keyframeable. And we're going to do the same with our mask. Expand that out. We're going to click and drag through all of these so that they're keyframeable. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to determine, let me zoom out, and we're going to tell this how many frames our animation is going to be. So let's move forward into timeline to where this scene ends. Let me zoom back out here. Okay, so let's go back one frame. Okay, so right here is where it's going to end. So we need to set a keyframe for the opacity for our mask or our transform features of the mask, and we're going to tell it to be 100% on the opacity, and we're going to move forward one frame and then tell its opacity to be 0. Okay, we're also going to tell this element, the layer 2, or the I think it's layer 1. Yeah, we're going to tell layer 1. We're going to tell it to its opacity at this point to be, let's go back one frame for it to be, set a keyframe for that to be 100%, and then one frame forward we're going to tell it to be 0 so that it's gone at the end of that particular scene. Alright, so if we move back, we can see that if we select our mask, we're going to move right back to where it begins, right here, and we're going to move to that end keyframe right here. Make sure we're on it, because we've got two keyframes set there. This one at 100%, this one at 0%. So make sure we're not on this one. We want to be on the last one of that scene. And then we're going to take that mask and we're going to begin to manipulate that in a way that we can have it appear as if we had a blood run down this screen here. And this is kind of tricky. You'll need to play with these curves so that you have a realistic looking blood drip. This can be kind of tricky, and you'll play with it once you do some previews of it. You'll get an idea if it looks believable or curved. Or you want this bottom to be curved as if it's ran down the screen. And see, this beginning, we need to thin that down a touch. Zoom out on this. We'll move that guy in. And this is going to be a fast scene, so we want to give this considerable movement so that you'll even be able to see it. Let's move that up. Alright, so if we move through that, you'll see, let me disable that mask so you'll be able to see it. And you see we've got a neat little animated blood drip as it began to run. And we can also do it over here, but this scene's going to be so short, so brief, that we're very likely not going to even be able to see all of it. We just want the impact to occur. So let's move on down to our layer 2, disable layer 1, and I think it's pretty good. We do want to apply a fast blur to the blood splatter. So let's take that one there, and we're going to apply a fast blur to that solid. And remember, we're going to knock that up. Let's see what we had for our numbers. We had 50 on our fast blur, so we're going to go into this one and tell it to be 50. All right, and you'll see that how it drips down. It may need to be even less. Very likely, it looks like it's going to have to be less. Okay, so let's turn that guy back on. And let's go into layer 1, and it's fast blur. Let's see what we had for our solid. We looked at about 9 on that. So let's knock this one up to about 9. Okay, we'll probably go a little bit more on that guy. Let's do a 30 on that, and then we'll take our bump our blurriness up to 30. Let's see how that's going to work. So let's turn off our mask so we don't have to see that. And when we do a hit, we see we've got a blood run happening right there. So now what we need to do is we need to go back into layer 2, like we did with layer 1, and set the duration for how long that is, and when it begins in the scene and when it ends in the scene. So we've got layer 1 selected, and we're going to tell it opacity 0 to 100, and we're going to go all the way to the end here. Back up keyframe right there. So here we're going to be 100% on the opacity of that. So let's set a keyframe on layer 1. See how we're going there. Actually, it's layer 2. So let's expand out layer 2. And we're going to set, go back a frame, set the opacity at 100%, go forward 1 frame, set the opacity at 0%. Alright, so we're pretty much good there. Alright, so at this point I'm going to save my project. I'll save it to my desktop. Taking a little bit because I've got, you know, screen capturing and webcamming, all those excuses. Alright, so we're going to add this composition to the render queue. And I'm going to tell it to save this as a QuickTime animation file. And we want our audio. And so let's go ahead and tell it where to save it. We're going to put it on our desktop. And we'll click save and then render this out. So we'll let this render, and I'll be back just as soon as it's finished. Alright, so that was that. We've got our final, and we'll go ahead and put that over here. I'm going to render it out to an MP4. These QuickTime animated movie files are very large in file size and very difficult to play. So I'll render that out as an MP4, and we'll play it in Windows Media Player Classic. And after that, to finish off the video, I'll play it just at the end of this tutorial. Alrighty, so that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed that and find a use for it in your upcoming projects. Remember, download a copy of the custom blood splatters in the description below. And if you have a project that you've used this little effect in, share it with me. I'd love to see what you've created. Alright guys, remember, if you like my videos, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. And if you want to see more in the future, remember, please subscribe. Alrighty, talk to you later. Bye-bye.